Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am V, and I wanted to talk briefly about Meghan's podcast since I hadn't actually had the chance to talk about it since it dropped. If you are a Meghan fan, you know very well which podcast I'm referring to, and it is Archetypes. Archetypes is that girl. If you don't have a Spotify account, go ahead and get one because it is an exclusive to Spotify. But before I jump into that, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss a video or a podcast. I post all of my content on here on YouTube, and there are some things that I don't upload to the podcast that are on YouTube. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you do want that longer form content, definitely subscribe to my podcast. That's where I go into plenty of detail about whatever it is I'm talking about. And that's for the girls that got 45 minutes to 1 hour, maybe a little bit longer. You can find that podcast, The Sussex Set, on all of the platforms wherever you get your podcasts. Okay. Archetypes, the podcast that explores labels that hold women back. As I was listening to the most recent episode, Demystifying the Dragon Lady with Margaret Cho and Lisa Ling, I couldn't help but wonder, is this Meghan's secret weapon? This podcast? I think it is. And what do I mean by that? I think this podcast is a very powerful tool that Meghan can wield that will do the heavy lifting of promoting Meghan as she is, just as a person. And because the podcast is pre-recorded, all of the episodes have been recorded, to my knowledge, all Meghan has to do is release an episode every Tuesday. And every single week, more and more people are being introduced and reintroduced to Meghan as a person. And they are getting to make their own determination, not just about Meghan as an individual, but Meghan as a team player. And of course, as a feminist. Now, Archetypes was on a bit of a hiatus due to the Queen's passing, but it is back. In episode 4 of this season, Meghan has actor and comedian Margaret Cho and broadcast journalist Lisa Ling talking about the stereotype of the Dragon Lady and how that impacts or has impacted them throughout their lives and their careers. And I swear, every time I listen to an episode of this podcast, it becomes my new favorite. That's just how good it is. And it never fails that when I'm listening to the episode, my mind always settles on the fact that this podcast says so much about Meghan as the executive producer, as the host, and as the primary content generator, as well as Meghan's leadership. Like, that really comes through overall. And ultimately, I am really happy that Meghan gets to work around professionals once more. So far on Archetypes, we have had Serena Williams. Serena Williams was episode number 1. And that also explains the delay for really the better part of 2022. Everyone was wondering, hey, when is Archetypes going to drop? You told us it was going to be this year, Spotify. And when you listen to that episode, you understand why it was delayed. Because what I got from it was that Serena Williams told Meghan about her retirement before, like a while ago. And so obviously with Serena talking about a retirement, they couldn't drop that episode before the retirement actually happened, and Serena made her own announcement. So I love that, and that understanding between those two ladies as friends. Episode 2, Mimi, Mariah Carey, a whole entire another fan base. All right. And then episode 3, Mindy Kaling, where they talked about being a singleton and how Mindy made the choice to have her children on her own and raise her children on her own as a single woman, professional woman. By the way, with Mariah Carey, the word was diva. They explored that. And with Serena Williams, they talked about ambition and how people use that word to bash women. For each of these conversations, I love the idea of just being a fly on the wall, listening to just a conversation between women on a topic that I care about as a professional woman. Everyone that Meghan has on her show is a professional, someone who has done things in their life, and someone you probably know. But not only that, Meghan also finds a way to bring in a professional to give expert views and data and or perspective or context on the overall topic. In the episode with Lisa Ling and Margaret Cho, sociologist Nancy Wong Nguyen is also giving input. Color, who have been negatively impacted by racist stereotypes. Now, all of us know what it feels like to be impacted by stereotypes. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, young or old. If you've been around long enough, you have been stereotyped. But racist stereotypes are bred from white supremacy, especially those about women of color. In a white supremacist society, white women are the default, and they get to just be. That's not debatable. Generally speaking, they are given the benefit of the doubt, and they get to just be who they are. And the determination about who they are is only made after the fact. Women of color, however, are not given that grace, especially not in entertainment. Asian women are given one set of labels, Latinas are given another set of labels, Black women are given yet another set of labels. They're typically negative and often rooted in fetishization from the white male perspective. Well, in the episode Demystifying the Dragon Lady, Margaret and Lisa talked about their experiences in their chosen professions. And it's so important for all women of color to hear and understand the experiences of other women of color, especially in the work world, because it takes up so much of our lives. And when you are a part of that community that is marginalized or stereotyped, it feels good to know that people will get to hear what you experience. And when you're part of a community that is so quickly and wrongly put into a box, it's disheartening, and it's easy to believe that no one understands you or people like you. Or you may feel like your concerns are dismissed altogether. And about halfway through this episode, Lisa Ling said something that was so true, and it stuck out to me. She said, Asian people in this country have been historically just overlooked. Our history isn't told in our history books. One could go their entire educational career without learning a single thing about Asian American history or the contributions of a single Asian American. Not feeling like you belong, feeling like you exist in the periphery is in many ways its own kind of oppression, and it becomes easy to understand how and why so many Asian people started getting attacked in the wake of COVID-19. Because if you don't see these people as being from here, if you don't see me as being from here, it becomes so much easier to dehumanize me because you have no grounding. Your people have no grounding. I heard her say that, and then I thought, wow, I never thought about it that way. I'm Black American, so I'm a minority in this country as well, but Black people are double digits in terms of percentage of the population, as well as Latinos. They're double digits. They're the largest minority in America. The Asian American population, however, is something around 6%. And I think the smaller your numbers are in a population, the easier it is for that population overall to summarize an individual who by nature is very complex because they're a human being with just one or two stereotypes. Ultimately, it's about being seen and heard, because if you're seen and heard, you're empathized with. What they tackled in this episode, the Dragon Lady, the stereotype of the Dragon Lady, and that is described as an Eastern Asian lady who's strong, deceitful, domineering, mysterious, and often sexually alluring. And this episode, quote unquote, demystifies that. And it does it very, very well. So well, in fact, that by the end of the episode and hearing these women talk about their experiences, you as the listener putting yourself in their shoes, you realize that these episodes underscore the harm that comes from these archetypes. But they also demonstrate the resilience of any woman that has had to rise through them. I loved hearing about Lisa Ling's journey through journalism, how she got into the field, but then also how she navigated throughout the field. She's had a very long, very successful career. She's always, by the way, been one of my favorite journalists. I remember watching her when she was on Oprah doing segments for the Oprah Winfrey Show. But even before then, I always waited around for her segments because I felt, even as a young person, like I felt how seriously she took her work. And that is a testament to her tenacity, especially as an Asian woman having to combat stereotypes all the way up and through your career. She has always come across to me as someone who is so solid in who she is, very deliberate in her reporting, and she's bringing you information that matters in the world. To be able to have done that for as long as she has in a field like journalism, which is so competitive. Margaret Cho as well, though, because the entertainment industry, that's really competitive. But for both of these ladies to be able to have brought their best selves to their profession despite the obstacles and boxes and stereotypes that they've had to navigate and or combat, it's a real testament. And that's what makes Archetypes so brilliant as a podcast. It accomplishes multiple things in every single episode. We tackle an archetype. We learn about someone else's personal experience. In this case, Lisa Ling and Margaret Cho for the latest episode, but that's your empathy piece. And there's typically either an expert or supporting examples that illustrate where we've seen that archetype in popular culture or society in general. Each week, listeners learn something new and connect with the new community and hopefully strives for a better understanding of that community. And if you notice, we learned a little bit more about Meghan too. The reason I say this podcast is her secret weapon is this. Although Meghan highlights a new guest in every episode, each week she puts something out there in the world that represents the essence of who she is so well that there is no critic that can take away from that. Each week, her work speaks for itself. This is her baby. Meghan has demonstrated repeatedly that accomplishment is important to her. And not just accomplishment for accomplishment's sake, but for the sake of bringing about a change or to highlight an issue. Every single week, her work speaks for itself, but it also speaks for her. And anyone who dares to listen will make up their own minds over the blaring headlines. And I think back to the Oprah interview when Meghan talked about how little girls dream of being a princess, but what's better than being a princess is being a woman who has her own voice. And she made the reference to the Little Mermaid who gave up her voice in order to be a princess. Well, just as she did before she met her prince, Meghan is making her way in the world with her voice. And with Archetypes, Meghan shows us that she has no plans of slowing down. Get into Archetypes with Meghan, my friend. It is really good listening. And thank you for listening. As always, take care. And until next time, peace.